In the year 1162, on the windswept steppes of Mongolia, a child was born who would reshape the world. His birth name was Temüjin, but history remembers him as Genghis Khan, the universal ruler who created the largest contiguous land empire humanity has ever known. By his death in 1227, his domain stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, encompassing nearly 12 million square miles and 100 million people, 1/5 of the world's population. But what truly happens when one rules like Genghis Khan? The answer is both more complex and more relevant to our modern world than most realize. The Mongolia of Temüjin's birth was a fractured landscape of warring nomadic tribes, each fighting for scarce resources and survival in one of Earth's harshest environments. When Temüjin was just 9 years old, his father was poisoned by rival Tatars. Abandoned by his tribe, the boy and his family were forced to forage for roots and small game to avoid starvation. This crucible of hardship shaped a leader whose strategic brilliance would become legendary. By 1206, Temüjin had united the warring Mongol tribes, an achievement previously thought impossible, and was proclaimed Genghis Khan. What followed was a series of military campaigns that redrew the map of Eurasia and reshaped human history. The Mongols did not merely conquer, they transformed, explains Dr. Richard Ingram, professor of Central Asian Studies at Columbia University. Their approach to governance contained elements that were centuries ahead of their time. The Mongol method of rule operated on several key principles that would influence empire builders for generations to come and still resonate in leadership approaches today. First was meritocracy. In stark contrast to the hereditary aristocracies of medieval Europe and dynastic China, Genghis Khan promoted people based on their abilities rather than their bloodlines. One of his most successful generals, Subutai, was the son of a blacksmith. Jebe, another brilliant commander, had once shot an arrow at Genghis himself before being recognized for his skill and promoted. This system allowed talent to rise, regardless of origin. The Khan established what historians now recognize as one of the first examples of a professional army with a sophisticated command structure. He divided his forces into decimal units, groups of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, creating a clear chain of command. This organizational structure was so effective that variations of it are still used in modern military forces worldwide. Communications represented another revolutionary advance. The Mongol Empire established the Yam system, a network of relay stations approximately 25 miles apart across their vast territories. Riders could travel up to 200 miles per day, carrying messages and intelligence. This system predated the American Pony Express by over 600 years and allowed for governance of territories spanning thousands of miles in an age when news typically traveled at walking pace. The Mongols created the first international postal service, notes Zara Evans, curator of Asian history at the British Museum. In the 13th century, a message could travel from Korea to Hungary faster than at any previous time in human history. Perhaps most surprising was the Khan's approach to religious tolerance. While the Mongols earned their fearsome reputation through brutal campaigns against those who resisted their rule, once territories were conquered, Genghis Khan generally allowed religious freedom throughout his empire. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and followers of traditional shamanic practices all operated freely under Mongol rule, a stark contrast to the religious persecution common in medieval Europe. The Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace, that followed the conquests created an unprecedented era of stability across Eurasia. Trade flourished along the Silk Road as merchants could travel safely across vast distances. Ideas, technologies, and cultural practices spread rapidly. The compass, gunpowder, and printing press all traveled from China toward Europe during this period of open exchange. Marco Polo's famous journey to the court of Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson, was possible only because of this stability. The Venetian merchant's subsequent accounts introduced many European readers to the sophisticated civilizations of the East for the first time. Yet the Mongol approach to rule was not without its brutality. Cities that resisted were often destroyed completely. Contemporary accounts describe mountains of skulls left as warnings to others who might consider defiance. After the conquest of the Khwarezmian Empire in 1221, it is estimated that as many as 1.5 million people were killed in systematic campaigns of destruction. In 1258, Mongol forces under Hulagu Khan, Genghis's grandson, sacked Baghdad, then the intellectual center of the Islamic world. The city's renowned libraries were destroyed, their contents thrown into the Tigris River, which reportedly ran black with ink. The Grand Library of Baghdad, with its priceless collection of ancient texts, was lost forever. The Mongols practiced what we might call strategic terrorism, explains military historian Robert Irvine. The brutality was not random but calculated to minimize further resistance. Surrender immediately and you might be incorporated into the empire with your customs intact. Resist, and the consequences were devastating. This dual approach, tolerance for the compliant, annihilation for resistors, created an effective if terrifying incentive structure that facilitated rapid expansion. When Mongol envoys arrived at a new kingdom or city-state, their reputation generally preceded them, often prompting immediate surrender. The administrative innovations were equally significant. The Mongols established a sophisticated system of governance that incorporated local customs and administrative structures rather than imposing entirely new ones. They created the first international paper currency and standardized weights and measures across vast territories, facilitating commerce. In China, the Mongols established the Yuan dynasty 1271 to 1368 under Kublai Khan. Rather than dismantling Chinese administrative systems, they adapted and enhanced them, combining Chinese bureaucratic expertise with Mongol military might. During this period, foreign experts from across the empire were brought to China, including Arab astronomers, Persian physicians, and European craftsmen. The famous astronomer Jamal al-Din developed improved calendar systems and astronomical instruments at the Mongol court. The Persian physician Rashid al-Din served as a high administrator and compiled the first truly universal history, the Jami al-Tawarik, drawing on sources from China to Europe. The Mongols were not just destroyers, they were connectors, says cultural historian Zachary Ellis. They created the first truly global networks of exchange. Ideas that had developed in isolation for centuries suddenly came into contact, creating intellectual explosions across disciplines. By 1279, when Kublai Khan completed the conquest of the southern Song dynasty, the Mongol Empire had reached its territorial peak. For main khanates, the Yuan dynasty in China, the Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, and the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, governed different regions with varying degrees of autonomy. However, the very size and diversity that made the empire remarkable also contained the seeds of its fragmentation. Distance and different administrative challenges led to increasing independence among the khanates. By the mid-14th century, the unified empire had effectively dissolved into separate entities. The Black Death, which killed as much as half the population in some regions, further destabilized Mongol rule. Evidence suggests the plague may have originated in the Mongol territories of Central Asia before spreading along their trade routes to China, the Middle East, and Europe. In China, the Mongol Yuan dynasty was overthrown in 1368 by the Ming dynasty after a series of rebellions. In Russia, Mongol rule through the Golden Horde continued until the late 15th century, profoundly shaping Russian political development through what historians call the two-Tatar yoke. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of Genghis Khan's rule was demographic. A 2003 genetic study suggested that approximately 16 million men alive today, about 0.5% of the world's male population, carry a Y chromosomal lineage likely attributable to Genghis Khan and his male relatives. This genetic imprint represents one of the most dramatic examples of how a single ruler's actions can literally reshape humanity. When we look at what it meant to rule like Genghis Khan, we see both brilliant innovation and terrible destruction, notes political scientist Dr. Rachel Irving. His approach blended strategic brutality with remarkable administrative flexibility. The question for modern leaders is which elements to emulate and which to condemn. The leadership lessons from the Mongol Empire remain surprisingly relevant. Their meritocratic approach to talent management mirrors modern corporate emphasis on performance over pedigree. Their communication networks reflect our need for rapid information flow. Their religious tolerance presaged modern multiculturalism. Even their military organization, with its clear chains of command, specialized units, and emphasis on mobility and intelligence, influenced military thinking for centuries. Napoleonic warfare, German blitzkrieg tactics, and even aspects of modern combined arms doctrine can trace conceptual lineage back to Mongol innovations. Perhaps most relevant to contemporary leadership is the Mongol ability to adapt. They did not impose a single model across their diverse territories but instead incorporated local expertise while maintaining core principles. This balance between standardization and customization remains a central challenge for global organizations today. Modern China's Belt and Road Initiative, an ambitious infrastructure development program spanning dozens of countries, explicitly references the ancient Silk Road that flourished under Mongol protection. The project reflects Beijing's understanding that physical connections facilitate not just trade but cultural and political influence as well, a lesson learned from the Mongols. Russian President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly invoked the legacy of the Mongol Empire in his geopolitical thinking, particularly regarding Russia's relationship with Central Asia. The concept of Eurasianism, which posits Russia as neither fully European nor fully Asian but as a unique civilization bridging both, owes much to the Mongol period. Even in corporate leadership, echoes of the Mongol approach can be found. Amazon's emphasis on rapid communication, decentralized decision-making within clear parameters, and willingness to enter new markets aggressively all have parallels in Mongol methods. The Silicon Valley mantra of move fast and break things could well have been a Mongol saying. Their ability to innovate rapidly, adapt to new challenges, and implement solutions at scale was unmatched in their era. However, the darker aspects of Mongol rule offer equally important lessons. Their strategic brutality, while effective in the short term, created lasting enmity in many regions. Cities like Baghdad never fully recovered from Mongol destruction. The cultural and scientific losses were incalculable. Power without restraint ultimately becomes self-defeating, argues ethical leadership expert Dr. Zoe Everett. The Mongol Empire fragmented partly because fear alone cannot sustain governance indefinitely. Modern leaders who focus exclusively on power projection often discover similar limitations. The Mongol Empire's relatively quick dissolution, despite its unprecedented size and sophisticated administration, reminds us that even the most impressive systems have vulnerabilities. Succession issues, communication challenges across vast distances, and the difficulty of maintaining cultural cohesion across diverse populations all contributed to imperial fragmentation. Today's multinational organizations face similar challenges. How to maintain cohesive culture across global operations. How to balance central control with local autonomy. How to ensure leadership transitions do not trigger organizational collapse. These questions would have been familiar to Mongol administrators. Perhaps the most enduring lesson from the Mongol experience is the importance of balance. Their most successful periods came when they balanced military might with administrative sophistication, cultural tolerance with core principles, centralized vision with decentralized execution. When this balance was lost, when brutality exceeded strategic necessity or when khanates became too independent, the empire began to fracture. This pattern of rise, balance, imbalance, and fall has repeated throughout history, from Rome to the British Empire to the Soviet Union. To rule like Genghis Khan meant creating systems that could incorporate diversity while maintaining core identity. It meant developing communication networks that connected distant regions. It meant recognizing and promoting talent regardless of origin. And it meant understanding that while fear might conquer territories, only effective governance could hold them. 8 centuries after his death, the legacy of Genghis Khan remains complex and contested. To some, particularly in Mongolia where his image appears on everything from currency to vodka bottles, he is a national hero and visionary leader. To others, especially in regions that suffered most severely under Mongol conquest, he remains a symbol of destruction. Perhaps both perspectives contain truth. The unprecedented empire he created brought both devastation and connection, both suffering and innovation. In this complexity lies its relevance to our modern world, a world still struggling to balance power and restraint, diversity and unity, innovation and stability. The question of what happens when you rule like Genghis Khan is not merely historical curiosity. It is a mirror reflecting our own challenges of leadership, governance, and power. The answers it offers are neither simple nor comfortable, but they remain as essential to understanding our world today as they were 8 centuries ago on the windswept steppes of Mongolia.